I believe a blunt force strike sent her down. She was injured, collapsing to her knees as her face hovered inches from the concrete. That was when she coughed up the blood. Seconds later, he grabbed her and hauled her away into the dark. To force compliance, he carried a weapon, a high-visibility firearm, that was clearly displayed as he made his approach. He used that gun for intimidation, yet she still resisted. What if I told you the person who abducted Nancy Guthrie left a trace behind? No prints, no eyewitnesses, and no confession. He left something far more devastating than any of those standard markers. A retired FBI profiler just spent weeks scrutinizing this evidence, analyzing every single frame and every microscopic drop. His findings fundamentally changed the current status of this investigation. The kidnapper made one critical, tactical error. The Bureau knows exactly what it is. Investigators are using forensic science to exploit that mistake, solving cases that remained cold for 30 years. Stay with me because this is not a standard timeline review. You already know the basic facts of the abduction. This is about what the forensics reveal right now and why this missing person case is closer to a breakthrough than officials admit. 84 years old, struggling with limited mobility and requiring daily medication just to maintain her basic survival. Even so, Nancy Guthrie did something on that porch the attacker never anticipated. She chose to fight back. Media coverage mostly focuses on the voids, no public suspects identified, and no official motive confirmed by the authorities. No arrest has been made in nearly 3 months. For those tracking this disappearance, that delay is beyond frustrating. But here is the data that remains buried. The bloodstains on that porch represent more than just a violent struggle. It is a forensic dialogue. If you understand the mechanics, it reconstructs almost exactly what happened during those minutes. More importantly, it provides a psychological profile of the individual responsible. Former FBI Special Agent Jim Clemente built his career solving cold cases by reverse engineering complex crime scenes. His expertise is behavioral analysis, examining the actions of a criminal to define their identity and patterns. He scrutinized the blood spatter on that doorstep frame by frame, and his conclusions completely reframe the trajectory of this entire hunt. Before we break down his full analysis, keep this one crucial detail in the back of your mind during this video. Unidentified DNA, forensic material not belonging to Nancy, her family, or anyone with access to the home, was recovered inside. Sheriff Nanos publicly confirmed that investigators believe this biological sample likely belongs to the suspect. The FBI crime lab is currently performing advanced testing on that sample. That is the massive blunder we are discussing. Every detail, the blood, the profile, the science, points directly toward that single forensic failure. There are 3 specific categories of blood evidence on that porch. Each one dictates a different phase of the assault. First, low-velocity spatter. Large circular drops fell vertically with no angle of impact or clear directionality. During this phase, Nancy was mostly stationary and upright. Blood was dropping directly from her face down to the porch floor. She was still on her feet. Then comes the medium-velocity spatter, and this is where the physics gets remarkable. These smaller droplets are not solid under close inspection. They are rings, hollow in the center like microscopic bubbles that burst on impact. Agent Clemente recognized the pattern immediately. Blood only forms those hollow rings when it is mixed with air. Blood only aerates when it has been aspirated. This means it entered her airway, filled her throat, and was forcibly coughed out. Consider the implications of that physics. Nancy was hit, the profiler believes, punched with enough blunt force to cause internal bleeding. That blood pooled in her throat, and as she collapsed toward the concrete, her face just inches from the ground, she coughed. Clemente's reconstruction was surgical. Nancy's face was between 6 and 12 inches from the doorstep during that specific moment. She was on her knees, forced down and choking on her own blood, yet she continued to struggle. Third, the blood smear on the right. This is not a drip or a spray, it is a distinct smear. A smear indicates that a physical object made contact with the blood after it landed, disturbing the original pattern. A boot, a knee, or a hand bracing for weight. Someone was physically inside that blood pool on the doorstep. Combined, these 3 patterns tell a clear story. Nancy Guthrie did not just faint or fall over. A direct blow dropped her. Her face was only inches from the cold porch surface. She cleared her airway of blood as she went down. Only then was she lifted and carried away. 84 years old, mobility impaired, on her knees and bleeding in the dark. She made them work for it. She didn't go quietly. Let's start by examining the high-resolution images of that blood evidence. The first image is this one. It provides a wide perspective of the spatter on the porch. Look at this doorstep. What story does it tell? It captures a frozen snapshot of violence. Low-velocity spatter sits here, medium-velocity spatter is scattered there, and on the right side, a heavy blood smear appears. That indicates a physical impact. Someone or something moved through that blood. A foot stepped in it, or perhaps an arm dragged across the concrete threshold. Examine those droplets. The larger stains lack directionality, suggesting they fell vertically from directly above the impact. However, the smaller droplets tell a far more violent story. These are medium-velocity droplets. They were expelled with force. They were coughed out. This was aspirated blood. Look at the rings. They are not solid stains, but hollow circles. That means the blood hit the pavement as a bubble. It contained air. It was pressurized. Air only enters blood during a cough or a sneeze. That happens when the lungs fill. This blood belongs to Nancy. This pattern reconstructs her final seconds. It shows us her struggle. Her face was less than a foot from the ground. She was hovering inches above the concrete. She was positioned directly over that stain. This porch is likely where she made her stand. This is where she fought her abductor. This is the point of the primary physical confrontation. She was 84 and frail. But here, she resisted. She gave him the initiative to strike her. The blow caused immediate hemorrhaging. Blood drained into her throat. She coughed it up as she collapsed. A haunting question persists. How does one person snatch an 84-year-old woman and vanish? How do they disappear into the night without leaving a single confirmed trace of their escape? Agent Clementi's forensic analysis is clinical. The blood patterns confirm his theory. Only one offender was present. This conclusion is vital. If two attackers were there, they would have maintained absolute control over Nancy. Two men do not let an elderly woman with limited mobility collapse onto a stone doorstep. They would have carried her or restrained her. She never would have hit the ground. Her face would never have been 6 inches from that porch. She never would have produced spatter. The act of falling and the subsequent fight provide behavioral evidence of one man struggling alone. In that chaotic moment, the suspect lost control. He was operating on his own. Camera footage confirms the suspect had a gun. That firearm was his tool of psychological dominance. He used the weapon to move her, but the dynamic shifted. Nancy fought back, and he struck. She hit the deck. Only then did he lift her. One man, one weapon, and one victim. The single offender theory changes everything. A lone actor cannot control every variable in an abduction. One person leaves more forensic evidence behind. One person must still interact with the outside world. A lone suspect's sudden change in behavior is noticeable. Someone always sees the cracks in the facade. The evidence points to a single kidnapper. 2 men would have overpowered her. She never hit the floor. She would never have been low enough to leave medium-velocity spatter on her own threshold. How could one man pull this off? She was 84 years old. Carrying a person is difficult, regardless of their size. He was not carrying her at first. She was walking under duress when he punched her. She was injured. She dropped to her knees. Her face was inches from the stone as she coughed out the blood. The struggle was visceral. After the strike, he hauled her away. He had a gun, a very visible, very real firearm. He used the pistol to force her outside. But on that porch, the elderly woman fought back. Who is he? Clemente uses behavioral profiling to build a specific portrait of the suspect. This profile is psychologically grounded. It provides the tactical roadmap necessary to solve this abduction. The subject is male. The physical violence and the logistics of the crime are characteristic of men. He acted alone. Lone actors in these types of premeditated cases share a specific psychological signature. They believe they are superior. They plan obsessively. They spend hours rehearsing the crime in their minds. They think they covered every track. They never do. His mistake is somewhere on this porch. The motive likely splits in two, starting with cold cash after ransom notes reach the Guthrie family. Though a Californian named Derek Kella faces federal charges for dispatching fraudulent ransom texts to the family, his trial starts June 23rd in Tucson as detectives consider if any demands actually linked to the abduction. An extortionist demanded cryptocurrency, treating a human life like a ledger entry, but Clemente identifies a second, darker motive. This secondary drive is deeply personal and unsettling, suggesting the suspect purposefully focused his sights on his victim. He likely targeted Nancy Guthrie to inflict maximum pain on Savannah, making her suffering the primary objective, not a byproduct. Using your expertise as a criminal profiler, what does the evidence reveal about the identity of the person who took her? If two of those ransom notes were legitimate, then profit drove the crime, yet I believe a second motive exists. There is likely a dual purpose here, specifically aiming to destroy Savannah Guthrie by abducting her own mother from her. He intended to strip that bond away, perhaps fueled by a previous interaction this offender had with either woman. Such a confrontation might have occurred weeks or even years ago, festering in the suspect's mind until he finally acted. Alternatively, it was a pure internal delusion where he nurtured a toxic resentment until his anger reached a breaking point. He felt entitled to seize the mother to punish the daughter, which suggests you believe this was a solo male actor. You are describing a lone male perpetrator driven by a singular pathological obsession with Savannah Guthrie that consumed his daily life. That seems probable, as he likely watched her morning broadcasts until his fixation transformed into something dangerous and actionable. A private delusion may have gripped him, though it is possible he shared these disturbing thoughts with a few select people. Those conversations provide a lead, because eventually a witness will recall this individual speaking about her or his sudden wealth. Someone will remember a man who constantly mentioned Savannah or bragged about a massive financial windfall just before the disappearance occurred. When those surveillance images went public, he likely fled the area immediately, citing some fabricated personal emergency as his excuse. Think about the fractured psychology required for this, as no one simply decides to kidnap a high-profile journalist's mother. Such an operation demands a long-term sustained fixation that intensifies over months until the suspect is compelled to strike. This obsession likely fermented for years before turning into physical action, leading to Jim Clemente's specific theory on the perpetrator. This man likely viewed Savannah Guthrie on the Today Show every single morning, developing what behavioral experts categorize as a fixation. It is a parasocial relationship, a dangerous, one-sided emotional bond with a public figure who is completely unaware of his existence. Gradually, his internal psychology warped, turning admiration into bitter resentment and eventually into a rage that fueled a criminal plan. This was no random act of violence, because in Clemente's expert view, Nancy Guthrie was a precisely calculated and deliberate target. Her daughter's fame made her the victim, and this specific profile is now a critical tool for investigators solving the case. Perpetrators with these obsessions eventually talk to others, revealing their disturbing thoughts to a coworker, a neighbor, or a friend. Someone remembers odd remarks about Savannah Guthrie or saw suspicious movements from a neighbor during the exact window of the disappearance. Perhaps a relative heard him mention a sudden influx of cash, a detail that feels far more suspicious in hindsight today. Clemente points out that when those doorbell camera photos hit the news, the suspect likely vanished from his normal daily routine. He almost certainly left town, using a pre-planned excuse like a sudden work trip or a family crisis to cover his tracks. That abrupt exit was noticed by someone who is currently holding on to a memory or a comment that links him here. They may have witnessed a strange behavior or a sudden disappearance that they haven't yet connected to this ongoing kidnapping investigation. Consequently, the FBI tip line is still live, and the reward has surged to over $1,200,000. A single call from the right witness changes the entire trajectory of this case, exposing the one mistake the kidnapper made. The abductor wore a mask and deactivated the security cameras, meticulously planning every detail of his entry and his quick escape. He thought he had eliminated all physical evidence, yet detectives discovered something inside the Guthrie home that he could not anticipate. They found mixed DNA containing genetic material from multiple people, and crucially, Sheriff Chris Nanos confirmed a breakthrough in the analysis. He stated publicly that some of that biological evidence does not match the family or any authorized employees at the residence. Nanos claimed they likely recovered DNA belonging to the suspect, though the word may remains the cautious phrasing of an active probe. That tentative language is standard for police, but the actual weight of this forensic discovery is massive for the prosecution. Unidentified genetic material was pulled from the crime scene, and investigators can find no innocent reason for that sample to exist. This unaccounted for evidence is the suspect's fatal error, and it marks a critical turning point in the current forensic investigation. This forensic path is reaching its climax as the DNA evidence, which includes a hair sample, was processed through the Pima County Laboratory. The Sheriff's Department sent evidence to Florida-based DNA Labs International, but initial progress remained agonizingly slow. Mixed DNA samples demand painstaking forensic labor to separate genetic contributions from multiple individuals and isolate one usable profile. The sheriff publicly acknowledged that the lab faced significant sample challenges, warning that final results could take several months. The FBI formally requested access to this biological material approximately 2 months before they finally received it. After 11 weeks, the original hair sample was officially transferred from DNA Labs International into the hands of the FBI. Now, experts believe the most advanced forensic identification methodology currently available is being brought to bear on this evidence. Cece Moore, chief genetic genealogist at Parabon Nanolabs and a premier expert, told Fox News she feels extremely confident. Investigators aim to utilize Astria Forensics, the San Francisco lab that successfully cracked the Gilgo Beach serial killer case. In that investigation, rootless hair samples once dismissed as forensically useless were successfully used to construct a DNA profile. That specific profile led to Rex Heuermann's conviction, and Moore has personally seen success in 6 similar forensic cases. The core technique here is investigative genetic genealogy, the exact science used to identify the infamous Golden State Killer. Forensic teams identified Joseph James DeAngelo in 2018 following decades of failed conventional investigation and cold leads. Here is the process and why it matters. Standard DNA testing typically cross-references a forensic sample against the CODIS database. This is the FBI national database containing roughly 27 million profiles, primarily from those arrested or convicted of crimes. CODIS returned no hits on evidence tested in the Guthrie case, suggesting this DNA belongs to a first-time offender. He likely lacks a qualifying criminal conviction, yet investigative genetic genealogy does not require his specific profile to be in CODIS. This method reconstructs a family tree from biological samples by scouring consumer ancestry databases that millions of people use today. Scientists search for distant relatives like second or third cousins who share just enough genetic material to form a lead. Investigators track that thread, constructing a family tree forward and backward until they pinpoint a specific individual who fits the data. The suspect must match the profile, the geography, and the timeline. This is not theoretical. It has worked in hundreds of cases. This technology identified a killer 40 years after his crimes, and Moore spoke to NewsNation about this specific hair sample. If they truly possess a rootless hair belonging to that kidnapper, then this technology will absolutely solve the case. She candidly noted that results are never instant and usually take months, but she assumes they will make this a top priority. She added that multiple attempts are often necessary before a viable profile is extracted. This is a process, not a guarantee. It is the most powerful tool available, and the FBI now holds the sample. The kidnapper likely never knew this existed. He walked onto that porch completely unaware that a single strand of hair, even rootless and degraded, could be traced. Even mixed with another person's genetic material, it can still lead back to a specific name and address. He knows now. Everyone following this case is asking the same haunting question, so I am going to address it with brutal honesty. Is Nancy Guthrie still alive? Agent Clementi confirmed without hesitation that she was alive when carried from that doorstep. Forensic blood evidence supports the conclusion that she survived the initial assault and was abducted while she was still living. Was she alive during any part of her disappearance? Well, she was certainly alive up until the point of abduction. She fell at her own front stoop, so when he took her, she was alive. Beyond that point, answers become difficult. Law enforcement has not stated it publicly, but she is 84 years old and requires critical daily medication. Without consistent access to her meds, her condition is life-threatening, especially given her existing mobility limitations before this occurred. She has been missing for nearly 3 months now, but investigators have made it clear this case is not winding down. The investigation is escalating. The FBI lab has the DNA, and multiple facilities across the country are working simultaneously. A reward exceeding $1,200,000 remains active and unclaimed. The tip line has not been closed. Savannah Guthrie returned to the Today Show following a 2-month absence and spoke on camera in her own words. "It is too much to bear, thinking I brought this to her bedside. This happened because of me. I am so sorry, Mommy." And then she returned to that desk, not because she has moved on, because she has not. Every morning she appears on that screen. She is still searching for the mother she lost that night. Every single morning she sits at that desk. Every morning she appears on that. Through the screen, she broadcasts her mother's name to millions. She refuses to let the pressure fade. In an investigation this cold, pressure is tactical. It fuels the tip lines and keeps that reward money relevant. It signals to the person of interest that the world is watching. Here is the current state of play. Federal investigators hold the DNA. Lab techs are running advanced sequencing. Forensic genetic genealogy is the primary weapon here. They are deploying this technology against the evidence now. The profile is ready and the hotline remains wide open. The bounty is over $1,200,000. Somewhere out there, a witness is holding the truth. Maybe a colleague who spoke about Savannah Guthrie with a disturbing, obsessive fixation that felt off. Perhaps a neighbor or friend who vanished around February 1st and returned as a completely different person. Or someone who overheard chatter about cryptocurrency or ransom from an individual who had no reason to know. A person who saw a detail, buried it, and hasn't yet linked that memory to this specific disappearance. If you are watching this, realize that subjects of interest always seek out content regarding their own crimes. Call 1-800-CALL-FBI. The reward stands at over $1,200,000. The Bureau does not abandon cases of this magnitude. When the forensic genealogy produces a viable genetic profile, if that mystery DNA is mapped through a family tree to a living relative, this investigation ends in handcuffs. If this breakdown provided more clarity than mainstream media, please like and share this to expand the reach. Send this to anyone tracking the story. Help them piece together the evidence and the timeline shown here. Post your theories in the comments. I read every entry. The real investigative work often starts in the discussion. Subscribe now. When this case finally breaks and the forensics say it will, you need to be right here. Call 1-800-CALL-FBI. Reward over $1,200,000. Nancy Guthrie. Missing but never forgotten.